Probably didn't get enough people on Halloween, I say.
Okay, now we are ready.
Sure. Welcome to the November 13th, 2023 meeting of the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Reshma Patel, and I'm the chair of this committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 6:34 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law now requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature on Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. B. Disman has graciously volunteered to take minutes tonight, so thank you, B. For anyone else who has not yet taken minutes this year, please sign up with Brendan. You can there's a link to a form that he can share with you, and we greatly appreciate anyone who would volunteer to take minutes. And I'd just like to share that, Brendan has a template, and because these meetings are being recorded, we really just need bullet points. So it's not that much detail, so to the extent that if you think it's going to be too much, it won't be. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan, will you conduct the roll call?
Committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Jim Collins.
Here.
B. Disman.
Present.
Nat Kalani. Here. Ava Marie Lassiter.
Present.
David Lowenstein.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Reshma Patel.
Present.
Steve Perez.
Present.
Roberto Ruiz Melendez.
Here.
We have perfect attendance.
Wow. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending, and it's wonderful to have perfect attendance. So now the agenda for tonight's meeting is in front of you. And I have one proposal. I want to move item number 2 below item number 3. Does anyone have any objection to that?
No.
Okay, so hearing no objections, and anyone online, I think B, you're the only one online. Are you okay with us changing that?
No problem.
Okay, great. So seeing that, the agenda is now adopted for this meeting. The minutes from the June 12th meeting and the October 10th meetings were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt both these minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting either set of minutes, please raise your hand and indicate which minutes you object to adopting. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the June 12th and October 10th meetings are adopted. Before we begin, some ground rules. In order to conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe the following ground rules. No one can speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that the members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like an email address that's already been stated aloud for the record. And so tonight's agenda, the first item on the agenda is discussion of New York State Assembly Bill A8049, which removes the requirements for in-person attendance for public meetings by community boards. And I don't know if, if people know the background of this, a bill, but, the CB6 office has helped draft it. And we, last year had led the way in trying to make sure that we still had the Zoom option once the emergency orders from the state went away. Assemblymember Alex Flores has introduced this, to the state assembly. And, we were supposed to have someone from his office speak, but
We do have someone from his office.
Oh, okay.
Amy Juliana.
okay, James is on. Well, thank you, James, for joining. And, the bill is pretty straightforward, but James, if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I'm talking to my headphone microphones, and sometimes that's wonky here. I'll turn my camera on too. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm coming at you live from the Turtle Bay Association's annual meeting at Republic Bank. Yeah, the bill, like Reshma said, is very straightforward. In case you're wondering about other public meeting law, etc., it is very specifically tailored to only apply to community boards in New York. And it does not say community boards must be online or anything like that. It simply exempts community boards from the in-person requirements, which would allow the boards themselves to decide. So that was really our intent here, just to empower community boards. You can put to a vote through committees, whatever process the board decides or whatever is in the bylaws, etc. You can all decide then what sort of requirements you would like for in-person or virtual attendance for your meetings. That's really all it does.
So James, the question I have is on the bill, there is no sponsor yet in the state Senate and no co-signers in the assembly. So is that something that is being worked on?
Yes. And our ledge team could speak more to that, but yes, that is going to be worked on. And absolutely our plan is for this bill to not just be we introduced a bill. I will absolutely be getting worked on coming into the next session.
Okay, and so do you know a timing on that, or?
I do not, unfortunately, but I could check with our legislative director and see if he has a timeline in mind and send it to everyone.
Okay, thank you. And so I just, for the record, would like to point out that, we are, as you know, right now having a hybrid meeting, and this assembly bill, what it will do is rather than right now, for a quorum, we need to have everybody here in person. And so I appreciate that today we have a quorum, but there are situations where in some committees where they haven't been able to have quorums for meetings when they're larger committees because people haven't been able to attend in person. So it helps us with that problem. It helps us with a space issue with our full board meetings, finding space to have it. And so to be able to just have anyone who wants to be on Zoom can be on Zoom. Those who want to be on person can come in person, will help the community board, greatly. And I've heard the same issue with all community boards are having a problem getting space for meetings. So does anyone on the committee have comments to this bill? Any things you think we should consider or change? Jim?
Hi, James, I'm just curious, do you have any people that have expressed an objection to this?
Yes, we have when presenting it to other boards and things like that. But I will say 95% of the objections have abated when we made it clear that this bill isn't saying community boards go virtual. It's just giving boards the option. There are still some objections to that, but much less when we fully explain that we're just giving boards the option to conduct their meetings as any individual board sees fit. So even one community board might decide they can do virtual and one might vote and say, no, we still want an in-person quorum. That's fine. We're just leaving it up to the community boards themselves.
No objections from legislators, though?
None that I have heard because it's so specifically tailored to only apply to community boards in New York.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's go ahead, Amy.
I wanted to know how it affects the public that wants to attend some of our meetings in terms of our having this option. Would they be able to in some way access in a virtual manner the way we would be able to?
Yes, and currently anyone from the public is welcome to be on
Online.
Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah. And so all the meetings, the full board and the different committee meetings, people have been joining it. We've had I feel like a lot more people online than in person on the meetings that I've been at least. Yeah, so that doesn't, the public has that option. It's only for our quorum really that it makes a difference.
I see B has her hand raised.
Oh, B?
What is very significant about the bill is, first of all, it's the position that we had taken last year at the community board but it's the whole question of empowerment. All boards are different situations, and I think this allows individual boards to focus on their own situation. Also, from a budget perspective, we've had issues on where you have the full board meeting. We've been delighted that Waterside has, volunteered their facility, but we don't really have a budget to pay for space if people don't volunteer. So I think this is really a significant bill, and I expect that you'll see some objections to it, but I think we should continue and support this as a direction going forward.
Yeah, thank you, B. And I'd add that in terms of people who may be joining the board in the future, there are people who have childcare responsibilities or work responsibilities that wouldn't allow them to show up by 6:30 here or 7 p.m., but they could join from their office or join from home and still, feed their children or do whatever they need to do. Oh, Jesus and then Jim.
Okay.
Jim can go first.
Okay,
I'm just proposing perhaps that we draft a resolution in support and something that could be brought to borough board for the other community boards within Manhattan to consider and approve.
I have a question.
yeah.
Get closer to the mic. I have a question for James. James, so Brendan, can you go to the open meetings law text?
Sure.
I think it might be easy. So the open meetings law currently has two section 103s, a 103 that existed before the pandemic and a 103A that will be repealed July 1st if the legislature does nothing. The legislation that Assemblymember Horace is proposing will put a subdivision into 103A, which is the one that is meant to go away in July.
Right.
Am I reading the bill correctly in that this will sort of make 103A permanent? Or will the subdivision be placed into this section that may or may not get extended after July?
I believe, again, I'm not the legislative director and I'm reading it on my phone right now, making sure, but I believe the intent, and I'll double check with him, is to essentially, yeah, that provision that is going to be repealed. You got it. Sorry, you got it. I'm gonna head out of the lobby, everyone. 1 second. All right. Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. I'm an Italian guy from Jersey. I tend to come through loud and clear. I believe the intent would be that that provision that is currently allowed the boards to meet virtually, that is supposed to be expiring, it would be making that permanent. I don't know, like in the legalese versions, how that's going, like how that actually works, but I believe that would then be the intent.
Yeah, because we would hate for this to be successful and then only to go away after 6 months.
Especially if the session doesn't even start till January, right? So it passes like April,
Yeah.
right? And then we have 3 months. Yeah.
I assure you that we do not want that to happen either.
Yeah.
Good question. He's got it struck through.
Yeah. And thank you, Jesus, for that. So Jim has made a motion to draft a resolution in support of this bill. Does anyone want to second that?
I will second it.
Okay, thank you. So Nad said first. So Nad is seconding for B, for you taking the minutes. And so we will now have a vote. Brendan, do you want to do a roll call vote?
Yep. So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. Ned Collins.
Aye.
B. Disman.
Aye.
Ned Kalani.
In favor.
Ava Marie Lasker.
In favor.
David Lowenstein.
In favor.
Steve O.
In favor.
Reshma Patel.
In favor.
Steve Perez.
In favor.
Roberto Ruiz Melendez.
In favor.
Okay, with 9 in favor, nobody opposed or abstaining, this passes.
Okay,
Can we inquire with the chair if any of these, if this sort of resolution is already in process in other boards? So that we can make it a uniform bill?
Bill,
or
that's
uniform?
a good question. I don't know if you know about that, Jesus, so we'd have to check with Kyle.
I don't.
Okay.
I can check with Kyle. I can also check with the other district managers at other boards to see.
Okay.
But if nothing else, I don't see how it hurts to have our own and they.
Yeah. Yeah, and share it at Borough Board, which you mentioned, Jim, so I think that's a good idea. So, we now need someone to volunteer to draft, the resolution.
If I make the resolution, if I make the motion, I gotta write.
Okay, thank you, Jim. That's very good of you to do that. And we will present this at, the next full board meeting in December. On to the next item, which is a discussion of how community boards interact with state agencies. And this is more of a discussion topic right now that I wanted to open up, as you guys know that, we have certain state agencies that we work with often, like the State Liquor Commission, right? We're doing liquor licenses, or we're doing anybody who's going through the ULIP process, we're working with them. There's certain new agencies, like as we've seen with the Office of Cannabis Management, and we saw at the last full board meeting how there hasn't been that much structure around it, and we're trying to figure out how to do it, and it's also putting a lot more work on BASA to now have to deal with a new agency to deal with. Similarly, we have a proposed casino in our district that we have voted against as a resolution, but the Gaming Commission will now be interacting with us in a local capacity, and the current legislation there for the placement of casinos is there's going to be a community, it's called a CAC, and you'll have community input, but it doesn't say community boards will be involved. Now, it will go through a ULIP process, which hopefully would involve community boards. But what I thought we should just discuss is any new agency or an existing agency that's going to be working with our community and wants community input, that we have a community member involved in that process. So we know earlier how we can deal with it when we have to go through approvals in the situation of these licensees with cannabis, or if there's going to be gambling licensees or whatever other thing that could come up at any time in the future. So anyone have any thoughts on that? Yeah, Kevin, do you want to speak? Yeah.
I want to give everybody else the opportunity first. This is to help avoid a repeat of some missteps that are relatively new regulatory agency. And I really believe CB6 should keep a closer eye on new state agencies for more agency transparency, and therefore our ability to more effectively weigh in. So for example, the state, as Rachel mentioned, will be awarding up to 3 downstate licenses for casinos, and the new 2 new regulatory bodies come with that. The land use committee, of course, is expected to do a tremendous job on this, but as a safety net, I believe that this committee can also monitor the agencies for more transparency. Now, I think this is important to share. You've done a little bit already, but let's share some transparency on these new regulatory agencies. I think we know one proposed casino is part of the Solovia parcel between 38th and 41st Street between the FDR Drive and First Avenue. Now, there is a new state regulatory body, the Gaming Facilities Location Board. Let's call it the Location Board. It is overseeing the licensing process. Now, there is also a body that will emerge called, as you mentioned, the Community Advisory Committee. A number of these CACs are expected. Now, the Location Board's RFA process began on January 3rd. And this is, I'm giving you a lot of background. I think it's important for everyone to understand, because this is how we keep an eye on these new agencies. That process began on January 3rd. On February 3rd, the first round of questions from interested casino bidders were due to the Location Board. Nearly 7 months later, on August 30th, the Location Board released the first round of answers. Now, on October 6th, the second set of questions were due from the interested applicants to the Location Board. What we do know is that after the answers are distributed, there will be a 30-day deadline for the RFA responses. For each applicant, a CAC is formed within 60 days of the application submissions. In New York City, there are 6 members of each CAC. These are determined by the governor, mayor, state senator, assembly member, borough president, and council member. The CAC process includes public comment and hearings. And this is possibly the place where we dip in and make sure I think these proposals will continue with Soloviev to go to the land use, but again, we should also, I think, be part of that process. Now, the CACs, of course, will be subject to the state opens meeting law. After the 120 days for formation, to review applications and deliberate, the CAC will determine if there's public support for approving or disapproving the application. Now, 2/3 majority of the CAC is needed to receive a recommendation from the Gaming Facilities Location Board. Then ULURP can proceed. Sites then complete ULURP and zoning requirements. Only those applications that have been approved by a CAC and that have obtained zoning approval will take a next step. It's kind of like survival. After that zoning, the Gaming Facility Location Board will issue a report on its site selections. The report will be issued to the State Gaming Commission. There is not a timetable at this point for when selections will happen. Just wrapping up here, but selections will be based on a scoring system. 70% will be a business and economic development score. The CAC feedback will account for 10%. Diversity and workforce enhancement will each get 10% of the score. The State Gaming Commission will then take on the licensing process. There is no timetable at this point on this. A site that makes it to the licensing process round can still be disqualified for not meeting certain standards. I hope that background is helpful, and I hope we can keep an eye on this process and make sure that CB6 has a voice.
Yeah. And I'd just like to point out, for the record, Kevin O'Keefe is a CB6 member, not a member of this committee, but he is on CB6. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, and the reason for this to even come up, there's been a lot of criticism, as you probably have seen in the press, of the way things have been handled by the Office of Cannabis Management. And some of the public, meetings that they had, they actually took parts of it and they were deleted from online, where there was criticism by community members. And this is not about, I think it's not about being in support of cannabis, which, people have already voted for. It's more about how the licensing process went, how they interacted with placement, all of that, even issues with the farmers. And we just want to make sure, we have, in that case, we passed legislation because we wanted it to be a very equitable process of giving out licensees, equitable process of who's doing the farming. And it hasn't always worked out that way, and more transparency would be, better. And similarly, before the Gaming Commission gets more involved in communities, we want to make sure that we have a voice and also more transparency. Eva.
I just had a question, when you were talking about public comment and appearances. Is there any sort of procedure where members of this community board 6 would be able to make an appearance and a public presentation if there were any objections as to the locations in the gaming facilities location board? Is that where you would make your presentation?
That's up to the CAC, and they are going to be, it's going to be impressed upon them to make sure that they are completely reaching out to the community, and because their vote is not a vote of what they think their vote should be, is expected to be a vote of what the community wants.
So they'd be coming to us?
So a couple things. They should be expected to come to the land use committee. And if they don't, then that process, the CAC's process those hearings, I think, should include community board, direct input from community board members, but also other members of the public. There's many organizations in this community, obviously, and individuals that should be able to weigh in. I do know that I've heard that the casino operators all try to have a public area where they can show off renderings and have feedback and sort of a conversational forum. You can expect that, I think, with the Soloviev project as well.
Or would they be making a presentation to the full board meetings? Because when other projects have been in this area, there have been, let's say, Esplanade or other construction here, there have been architects or architectural companies that make presentations with the renderings. Would that be at the full board?
That's why we have to make sure of that. So I'll give you an example. When I was chair of the Parks Committee, we had a playground that was going up at St. Martin Park. That went through a very long process. That was in the Parks Committee discussion, but also had an opportunity for the full board to weigh in. If you're talking about making a presentation from, let's say, Soloviev to, those conversations have already started. I do know there's at least 20 community groups in our community that they have reached out to make a new presentation. There are new things in that presentation, including a fund that will go back into the community. There's a guarantee of a certain percentage per year of profits that will be used. The independent committee that will decide how that money's to be spent. So they want to show this, they want to show this proposal now. I wear a couple other hats and I have seen that proposal twice, but it's also an opportunity to ask questions. They will, as I understand, going to be going to the land use committee and doing that same type of presentation.
Yeah.
And that's going to take.
So I'd like to just point out the two different things. The one is the EULA process, which they go to land use. And then it's the community advisory committee, which doesn't have to come to community board. It is completely, that 6-member committee is completely separate. And I'd like to go back to, this is not in our district, but when everyone's heard about the whole big Amazon project that happened and that failed to happen in Long Island City. And that had a community advisory committee. But they didn't involve the local community board in that process at all. And they bypassed the EULA process because the governor and the mayor had done that. And we don't know if that would happen in this situation, but we just want to, going forward, I just thought that it would be better for us to be involved when these new type of state agencies or projects or existing agencies are now coming into our community to do work, that we kind of set up some ground rules.
Yeah, and we're holding, in our case, this OBF project, we're holding them accountable, asking tough questions. And right, I just want to make sure we're doing the same thing with the state regulatory agencies.
Yeah.
I see B has her hand raised.
B.
So I do have a question, because, and I think the comment before that was correct. I think the community board should really sponsor public meetings to have them explain what they're doing. You know, you have all these fragmented groups that are each listening to presentations and stuff, but really you don't have one group representing the community as we do. So it's the question in my mind of the role of the community board. In addition to, can community boards get to have one representative of community boards on the advisory committees? And for example, I was going to go back in history. I don't know how we joined the advisory committee for Bellevue and some of the other things where we had representatives. Rashma, do you know how we actually managed to pull that off years ago?
No, I don't know. I think that was before I was on community board 6. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's such a long,
We haven't in the past. Yeah.
yeah, it's such a long time ago that I don't even know,
Yeah.
how we did it, which is long. But we have been represented. So it's the question, do we lobby to be one of the people represented? But more than that, I think we should be the place where the public could come to listen to it, not to all these different types of groups itself.
Yeah.
I think that will come, and that's what was discussed, and let me back up. The land use has already gotten presentations from the group, in this case, the SOLVAF team. There have been updates in that, and they continue to say that there will be updates to the land use committee. So I see what you're saying. There should be one representative of the full community. And I think that should come in time as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think Jim had a comment.
The community advisory committee, is that at a borough-wide level or a city-wide level?
If you're outside of the city, there's only 5 members of that committee. If you're in the city, there's 6. And it's 6 people that will decide who the 6.
So it's for the
members are.
state. It's at the state level, basically.
It's a state overseeing it, but you have the governor appointing position,
Right,
borough president,
right.
state assembly member, state senator, borough president, and city council.
So 5.
Yeah, so the
Five
governor
versus
could
6.
appoint someone who's outside of the city, basically.
Yes, they can appoint who
Yeah.
they feel like.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And outside of our district, you would assume that everyone else would appoint someone in our district because they're
And
representative.
the function of the community advisory committee is what?
I think it's in the title. They're supposed to be the voice of the community, and that's
Yeah.
where we're concerned that we do have a community board called CB6.
6, yeah. And it's to what B is saying, that we should be where all the
It
discussions
seems
happening, and we
redundant.
should have a voice on it.
It seems redundant. I don't know who wrote the law or the legislation, but it just seems
Yeah,
redundant.
but what B is saying, like when Bellevue, in that process too, probably we had to really push to get ourselves on the CAC for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, Nat,
Um,
and Steve after that.
Yeah, just so I understand, are we trying, I don't want to get too involved with what land uses discussions are for the casino.
Yeah.
So is this more of us saying for new ones going forward, what our procedure is, or is it saying
how do we want to handle like this specific issue?
Yeah, so this is general. The land use is dealing with all the ULURP processes. This is more any agency that's coming before us, how we want to be involved. I would argue from what I've heard from what's happening at BASA with the Office of Kansas Management, it would have been better if they'd come and met with us beforehand, had said, hey, this is how we want to be looking at this process, which didn't happen. So stuff like that.
And be on call somewhat, so
Yeah.
not just one time.
Yeah, not one time, be available. Yes, yeah. Steve?
So a bit of a devil's advocate question, if we don't act for transparency for agencies, the Office of Cannabis Management, the casino bid, if we're not involved in the loop, they can certainly go forward without community board involvement. Is that true? The way it's set up today? Like they can pass a
Well, they
casino
try to be involved
install.
through land use.
So like, but also with the Office of Cannabis, I found it challenging to vote on something that we even know where the vote is on the Office of Cannabis Management side. So this is asking for all the agencies to provide transparency to the local community board. That's the discussion.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I thought someone else had their hand up, but anyone else had a comment? No.
Well, I'm just wondering what the action step is.
Yeah, so I guess, this, I wanted to open up for discussion. We can decide if we want to write a resolution or not. People, Jesus.
I guess I'm wondering, does the committee have questions? Because Kevin gave a rather detailed account of sort of some of the goalposts, the milestones in this project. The Solovia team, months ago, when they first started their public outreach to CD6 anyway, they gave a brief sort of timeline of some of this stuff. So some of the stuff did sound familiar. But I think it's been several months since many people have heard it. And, I don't think other than the state agency themselves, not many of us are experts on it. So it may be good to sort of start listing what questions we have, because it even sounds like there may be some confusion as to the mechanism that this community advisory committee takes. My understanding was every single bid will have a community advisory committee. There won't be just one for like the whole state that looks at all.
Yeah, and that is true. That is true. Every bid will.
And so that if we can start putting together maybe like a one pager of, okay, this is what the community advisory committee is. And maybe start asking, there seemed to be some suggestion that we're coming up around the time that this thing will come into being. Like, if that's true, then we should know as soon as possible, because members of the community are starting to ask, it seems like, so that we don't get caught unawares. If you guys have any specific questions, I guess the office can try and put them to the agency or something, but we need to start sort of getting our ducks in a row. If in fact this thing is coming down, we have no idea who's actually going to be on it.
There will be 30 days. It won't hit us right away. After those second round of questions, and again, the first round of questions took almost 7 months. October was when the second round really could go into next year easily. But there is 30 days after that before the CAC appointments are made.
But from a full board perspective, it just doesn't feel like we're involved. They came, presented once, set off, broad stroke, and then left. I said on a full board perspective, it just seems like they haven't touched
So
it.
the next land use committee, they did say, we will be back, with updates, so I think that.
So have they, they have not, from what I have seen, and perhaps Jesus, you would know more if they're on the agenda, because there is a new plan, this updated plan. Has that been presented to land use?
It has not.
It has not,
Not
yeah.
yet.
But.
So I think,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think Jesus is right. As I think of this, what is our objective? Okay. Is our objective to be a center for the community to know about plans like this and to raise questions? Is our objective for the full board to know about it, not just one committee? I think there are all questions because we do our work in committees. However, given the size of this project and the interest of the community, it really, as Stephen said, it really should be the full board holding public, sessions on it and being the head of the spokes so that everyone knows. So I do think we have to do a whole list of questions. What do we want out of it? I don't
Yeah.
think we're resolved on that.
No, and that's why we're opening up this. I'm gonna let Jim speak and then I'm gonna offer why I was bringing it up.
No, the fact that there's a separate CAC for each application frames things completely differently from what I understood you to say, which was a single community advisory committee.
No, if I've got.
No, that's all right. But I think that frames everything completely differently, and we need to have a much more intimate involvement at the CAC level for this particular application.
So my reasoning for bringing this up right now, I mean, obviously the timing of this issue of the casino is important, but also kind of looking backwards at how the OCM management happened to more broader thing, like anytime something like this is happening, there could be some other project that we want to make sure that we have a role in the CAC or we are this place, because right now Solivet has already spoken to many community groups. I've been getting email from different community members who I've never heard from before saying, here, I hear you're on CB6, or I hear this, I am against this casino, or I'm for this casino, what can you do, right? So rather than have that, I would rather have them come to a community board meeting and listen, right? And talk about these issues.
Not present, but to listen, or both?
Oh, yeah, well, have, obviously, we would want Solivet, whoever else is bidding, to come and present at a community board meeting, and all these individuals from different community groups would show up there. And
I asked that question and they said we will be doing that with the land use committee. We have maybe we'll reach out to land.
yeah, and so, but we are coming after they've spoken to all these other people, right? So I would
Well,
have
we
said.
accept it quicker.
See, the
Oh, maybe that's
problem is that the community action, whatever acronym, committee, is they're just looking for local support. It doesn't say land use committee or anything like that. So, and by their definition of this community act, advisory committee, hate that acronym, just talking to the land use is sufficient, and by their definition of local support. In our perspective, it would make sense if it went through full board support, so every member of the community board got a chance to review, decide, question, inquire, see the presentation. Isolating to just one committee seems like a touch and go perspective.
I don't think they think that that's their power. I think presented to land use and maybe hoping that it will go to full board so that they can talk to more
Yeah.
By
voices.
their website, it literally just says
Yeah.
Yeah.
gauge local support, doesn't say anything
Yeah,
about
yeah.
full board.
The
doesn't say
presentation, again, I've asked a lot of questions. And part of it is, they said they will present to anybody at any time. I asked to be presented at 4 o'clock on a Sunday. They were there at 4 o'clock.
Oh,
on a
yeah, so I see,
Sunday.
because they're eager, and that's why so many
Right,
community
they're-
members are hearing about it and see
So
the
if
proposal. Yeah, I
CB6
see
would
what
have
you're
called in and said, we want a presentation,
Yeah.
they're gonna make.
Yeah, like they would have showed up even today if we had called them. So I see, because they are obviously eager. I mean, that first presentation that they made though, they did come to full board. So what would happen is they would go to land use first, and then land use could invite them to come to full board. And so I think that would happen that first meeting, because I don't go to land use meetings, but I was, yeah.
There's a
full
lot of
board,
people reacting to the first proposal. They had a Ferris wheel and all, they've moved on to a lot. It doesn't even look.
Yeah.
So much has changed.
Yeah,
It's 5% footprint is for the casino now, 5% of the entire parcel.
yeah. See, and yeah.
Yeah, can I just ask a question about, we started the discussion with the purpose of this agenda item was to talk about generically,
Yeah.
how does this committee want to interact with, but now we're kind of getting into the weeds of like the
Yeah.
casino and
Yeah.
this other thing was cannabis management, okay, like
Yeah.
each agency and each process is going to be completely different depending on
Yeah.
what so what we're trying to do here is not sort of solve the problem of the casino issue or
Yeah.
but like generically, what would we do? What is the role of our committee vis-a-vis, maybe it's more appropriate for whatever a topic it be to go through whatever committee is more appropriate for that.
Yeah.
Because how else would we, land use obviously would be on top of the casino
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of ULURP. So that makes sense. They're
Right.
the channel of how to bring it to the full board.
Yeah.
But are you saying this committee, which is different, has a different role to play in that? What would it be?
Yeah,
And it depends on the topic, right? What if it was a health issue? Should it come to us or should it go to the health committee? You know?
yeah, and I think
so-
us, one moment, Jim, so we talk, like, after we get done with budget, right, we just go on governmental affairs. And so our role is governmental affairs, and the way I believe it to be is what is good government policy, right? So for instance, when there are public hearings, there's public testimony, and a state agency is deleting that testimony, that's not good government, right? And so I want to think of this as a much bigger process because all that individual issues will go to each of the committees. The health will go to the health committee, education could go to education, land use would do with the ULA process. For us, it's to think about what is a good government policy. Like, for instance, something that we worked on a lot in the past was electoral reform and how do we improve that process? And thinking about stuff that will hopefully make our city and state more fair for everybody.
I think with respect to the CAC, we should probably interact at this level with business and governmental affairs. And when it comes for ULURP, then it can revert to the land use committee. But I think the same procedure should apply for the cannabis management authority. Not so much with respect to individual license, but with respect to individual process. So for example, if they want to change their rule to say, cannabis shop every 500 feet, or limitation within 1,000 feet, we should have some say in that, but that should come from this committee as opposed to business and governmental affairs. I had an issue, for example, with I think anything that's legislative or regulatory should come first through this committee, such as, for example, the opposition to the Bob Holden's intro that we discussed at the last full board meeting. That should have come first to this committee before it went out through transportation.
So Jim, if I could ask him a question, you're proposing we need a process that would
Yes.
apply.
Utilize the
So-
process.
Yeah, so an outline, for example, of a process that's generic, that doesn't deal with specifics, the casino or cannabis. But this is the process and we would recommend the process to the full board so
Right.
that everyone knew what it is. So I think that's what we're trying to do and not get hung up on whether it's a land use or not, but what the process will be as new things come up. That's what Jim is proposing, and I think
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what we should be doing.
Right.
Yeah,
And I don't even know necessarily that we need to do it in the form of a resolution for the full board. I think it's discretionary through the board chair. But, it wouldn't hurt to have a reso, certainly.
I mean, the reason to have a reso is that if we outline it and we share it with our
And formalize
elected, formalize it, then to the extent that then we're interacting with these agencies and we've sent it to the governor, we've sent it to our state senator, we've
That's
sent
fine.
it to people, yeah.
This might be too complicated, but does it make sense to have a little closer interaction with land use on this and to have not a special committee, but just more communication, a better sense of what's happening in each of our meetings and just maybe having a core group of people who are aware of what's happening in both of these committees.
Yeah, and I think that's important because everybody on this committee probably, is there anyone who serves on land use here?
I do.
You're in land use, right? So we actually rely on people to tell us, especially when it's coming for the budget updates, like what's happening. And in this situation, we want it to be a broader frame and we wanted to actually interact with all the committees
Right.
on this.
Land use tends to deal more with technical aspects of the zoning resolution. We don't generally say, like, this presumably would require a change to the zoning resolution, or not to the zoning resolution, but I'm having a senior moment for the right word. Exemption from the standard of the zoning resolution, presumably. And it would deal with their height and setbacks and all the other things, because I presume they were talking about, when I saw their discussion, they were talking about having a Ferris wheel and a number of other things.
Yeah, that's,
So, that sort of thing would have to go through the land use committee, and the land use committee would go vote up or down.
all right, now,
I guess I just don't understand why, as governmental affairs, we should be taking on like the first lens for something that is like more land use or something like where it goes to like the cannabis would go to licensing. Like, to me, it feels like those committees are specialized in those topics. So it almost feels like we just like, I fail to understand why we should like take the first stab and then push it to them. So just letting them run with it because they have more context than we do.
No, I'm not saying that it would go through us. This is more of setting up a process of how community board interacts, or saying that we have a position on a 6-member CAC.
Right.
Right, not that they come, but if you disagree
Yeah.
with that, this is again,
No, yeah.
open to discussion
just-
and in different views.
Yeah, just like I think like transportation, right? Think
Yeah.
about something else, right? It's like Brian on transportation, like he knows what's going on. So
Yeah.
it's like adding us and adding the process feels like it almost slows things down, right? Like he knows what's going on. He's gonna go to his meeting and then like make
Yeah.
things happen. Whereas adding us, I think maybe it could be like a check on it, but I'm worried that we're like the first step is just gonna add almost like more bureaucracy that we don't need.
But if he's addressing a matter that's legislative in nature, as this resolution that we passed Wednesday deals with, and it really should come to us first, because it's going to affect how that legislation moves forward. My own view was that it was out of step, and that it should have really waited until the thing was before committee, that there was a committee vote, et cetera, and that the thing was actually being considered. That's why I moved to table it. It's actually a motion to permanently delay or postpone for a indefinite time. That's what should have been done with respect to that resolution, until such time as the city council had some further discussion about it. That was my point.
So, did you have a comment, Steve?
Wait for what the office has.
I'm not on the committee, but I try to listen because oftentimes a lot of the work of the committees has to go through the office. I find the whole talk of an overarching process still a little bit confusing. And I'm inclined to agree with Steve in that various projects can be so different that the contours of the process will vary depending on what's involved. But again, I don't want to, poo-poo anything like that because I'm not on the committee and I don't understand yet what's being proposed. So I'll reserve more comment on that. What I do understand is we're unclear on the mechanism by which this CAC will come into being. We're unclear as to what it's going to do. If we could maybe get your notes about the milestones, if we could sort of put all that stuff together, get questions together, and then, the government affairs aspect is that we educate people on what the process is. That I think, one, I can understand it, so forgive me if I'm dense, but two, it provides that knowledge, because the things that we're getting in the office right now are people writing in with their opinions of the casino, but also people asking, what happens next? When will I get to say something?
But opinions on which casino, because again, there's been different, that's part of the transparency, is making sure everybody knows which plan we're talking about to react to.
Sure, and we're assuming it's the latest incarnation of it, but what the office can do is the office can help provide correct information. And that's probably, as far as what I'm most interested in, is how can we provide that correct information rather than saying, you know what, I don't know when this CAC is coming. I don't know who's going to be on it. I don't know what it's going to do.
So what kind of information do we need to have? So, I mean, again, this was brought up as a topic of discussion, right? And I appreciate everyone's input, and I see your point that it might be too broad arching. I mean, I can take a stab at writing up something and saying what we want to do, and also if you can share with us the information on the milestones, and I mean, I think that's all online.
And I'm on every day, I'm researching.
So if you can share whatever information you have with everybody, because that's very helpful to all of us.
B has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I also wanted to go back to something that Jesus said, and Jim, we also, what's the role of governmental affairs? We also used to have joint committees coming together and doing things. I've seen less of that. So the question is, if this committee has a government affairs aspect of it, it would have an aspect of what land use is using, not the technical, but the type of thing, and then could figure out how we make it available to everyone. So there is another way of having our own meetings that are joint committees that are involved in that. I don't think I've seen many this past year, and that should be something that we should
The basement
reconsider.
apartments we did with housing and land use. But that was the only one. Yeah.
Steve. So
Yeah.
if we are going to go down, I understand
Mm.
the risk that we have when we don't act and discuss further on this. But if we are going to act on a more broad scale, if we're going down that path, in the example we just gave, the casino, the cannabis management, it seems like the common theme is, correct me if I'm wrong, they're both state agencies, not city agencies.
Yes.
So we lose a little bit of a disconnect of how they form their committees, how they form their groups, and how it translates down to us at the city level, the community board level. It seems like we need a partnership somewhere at the state level for this to be even, you know, to give us even guidance to where to go, to even have a further discussion, because right now, it's not like this is something that's been decided by the mayor or elected in the local city level. Both of those, at those two examples are state level, and it's right now, that's a pretty big disconnect where we are now.
What's our interface with the CAC? What?
No, so we don't know
Exist.
that. Yeah, we don't know that. And so we could also say, we could narrow this down to be like, okay, the CAC is gonna be forming. What do we want our role to be in that?
We
Or like,
will
what just one
likely
role in
have
that?
relationships with at least a few of those members, because one's gonna be a stately assembly
Well, that
member,
was-
city council
That was kind of
member.
what I was grabbing to,
Yeah.
saying
Well, no,
towards,
it's
like,
gonna be people appointed by them.
if it's
Yeah.
CAC today, if it's the office of whatever management the next day, there's something at the state level we don't have an interface with that clues us in as a community board to be part of that process. Because in this fashion, it seems like they could bypass.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I was bringing this up. And that's why I used that Amazon example,
Right.
where the community was bypassed and we saw how that fallout happened.
Who is our partner at the state
Yeah.
level to even to discuss this kind of thing? That's kind of, I don't know.
It should be our delegation.
Or
Is it
whatever that
assembly
location
member?
is.
Or-
Well, no, it should be our entire Albany
Yeah,
delegation.
that would be Harvey.
Senate-
That would be Harvey.
Senate.
Harvey.
Gonzalez,
there's
yeah.
a bunch of them.
Yeah.
We got 5 or 6 of them, and they've all got staffs, so there's plenty of people.
But it seems like there's a lot of fanning out, but there's no central point for when a new
No, I know.
committee's grouped, like today, like I said, it would be the Office of Cannabis Management, tomorrow might be the Office of Fish Management or whatever, that completely at a state level that has a chance of bypassing, and has light words like local approval. And that's somewhere where maybe our assembly member might know, but our state official won't know, but that's something that at a state level, somewhere where we can know when a new group is formed, we should be informed.
Yeah, so we would know a new group is formed. I mean, I think that
And what their process is.
because it's in the news, but our state reps will let us know about that. I mean, in both these situations. No, you don't think so?
I,
We are often the last to know.
Yeah.
Oh,
about
okay.
these sorts of
it's a
things.
jump.
Unless we are watching every agency
Yeah.
website, asking the electeds every single day if they've heard
Cody's
anything.
not your normal
When's the
startup
CAC
channel.
supposed to start?
Within 30 days after that second round of questions is into the interested applicants.
So that's,
The 6 electeds that I mentioned, they will
I'm
be,
looking for a date.
you can't, because remember, the first round of questions took almost 7 months. October 6th was when the deadline, the second round of questions. I don't think it's gonna be 7 months, but I don't know.
It's dependent
30
on
days
something
after.
else happening.
So maybe this is an even bigger thing that we need to, we want to be notified of things
Right.
when they're happening and address it to all our elected at the
Exactly.
state level.
I can draft a letter
Yeah,
to the entire contingent of our
Our state
statewide elected officials.
yeah.
And then propose that we have a meeting with them or their representatives, it's gonna be their representatives, to make sure that this moves forward at the community advisory committee level. I think that's probably a decent plan. Any objections, thoughts,
I want to be
comments?
careful with that word, community, community advisory
Yeah,
committee.
community advisory.
I'm just like careful about that wording. I hope you're
Yeah.
not commit to it, because they'll name it anything, right? Because
Well, no,
Yeah,
it's already in the I mean,
It's
it's
in the
already
law. It's
in the law, so. it's
legislation.
I'm
gotta
just
be
saying in the
considered.
grand,
Yeah,
what,
So
and as
Jim,
such,
you would do a more general letter, because you're talking about transparent, how we started this discussion, transparently,
Yeah,
community
I think so.
involvement.
Right. And I
Yeah.
can list a couple of examples, you know,
Right.
this and the,
Right.
could be, this.
Yeah, I wouldn't get hung up on the casino or the cannabis, but you could
Right.
use them
yeah,
as
yeah,
examples.
broader than more detailed, yeah,
Understood.
Right.
But I think those are probably worthy examples.
yeah,
They're good
No?
examples, but I wouldn't ask questions about them. I would talk about the fragmentation of information, the lack of representation. Yeah, I would go
Right.
through things like that.
yeah,
Right. And that would be for, the chair's signature. I'm just a
Mhm.
ghost.
okay, and then we have to, obviously, there's gonna be, by the time we get this together, we're also gonna have a new chair in January, but,
Yeah,
I agree. I think that what you just
She said-
discussed there
Yeah.
makes more sense to me
Yeah.
and seems like it'll be more effective
yeah,
than
Yeah.
us passing a resolution.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this is
yeah,
more direct in
Yeah.
terms of what we're trying to get and the objective at hand. So-
yeah,
the
All
mayor, the mayor and the governor big-footed the Amazon project.
Yeah.
There's a, the one out in Queens, that there's a special provision in the state law that allowed them to do
Yeah.
that without involving any of the
Any
community
boards.
boards.
what are you elected?
Hmm?
And the
Yeah, even the
elected?
electeds, and that's part of the reason why there was a backlash, because nobody was involved,
The
yeah,
the Las Vegas Sands bid in Nassau, the Nassau Coliseum
Mm.
site just got held up because they didn't follow the open meeting requirement and
Mm.
Hofstra wanted to object and they didn't have a chance.
oh, wow, see,
And also
Good.
the Bronx, the former Trump branded
Yeah.
golf course.
Oh, yeah.
The new elected mayor said,
Right?
no. And the previous one did want it, or was willing to listen.
yeah,
So the newly elected city council member has said no.
it's to the casino there,
No,
No.
that's a
No,
decision.
golf course.
the golf course, new golf.
The golf
okay.
course, yes, the one in the Bronx.
All right, well, I think, thank you, Jim, for offering that, and, you know, we can review the letter at our next meeting.
Mhm.
Um,
I'll send you a draft in
Okay.
2 weeks.
okay. And offer input, anybody have any otherwise we'll move on. Okay, and thank you, Kevin, for all your
Well,
information.
thank you for your leadership. on
Yeah.
this.
Very much.
Thank you. Transparency is important.
Mhm.
It's great to know.
And thank you all too, because it was, again, you know, kind of a vague idea, and so we're now hopefully solidifying it a little more. And then the last thing I wanted, which we touched upon a little bit, so starting the budget process again for next year. And I really would like it to be, and I've tried this, last 2 years I've tried this, where in January, February, I started emailing the chairs of all the committees and trying to get updates, and then usually at the end of January is when we get a response from the Office of Management Budget to the budget request that we
Thank you.
submitted. And sharing that and asking for responses or updates, but we don't get responses often. And I happen to serve on the Parks Committee, and luckily a lot of the requests are from Parks, so I'm able to update that. So what I would like though is everybody on this committee who is on a different committee to then in their committees, as you move along, as that stuff come up, like, oh, we want this to be funded, please make a note of it and bring it up at budget so we can update. And what I'm gonna share via email with everybody is the section, it's the district need statement and the write-up for each of the different committees that happen. And if you can think about that and how you may want to reword it going forward, update it as the year progresses, because it hasn't been updated a lot. And so some of the stuff, I've gone through it and changed stuff that's older, but I'm not at every committee meeting, so I don't know, you know, oftentimes what's being discussed. And so if you're on the committee, then you'd be the best to change something like, oh yeah, this issue we discussed and we had someone come present, or we didn't discuss this all year, take it out of this committee's district needs section. And then if anyone else has any suggestions on how things could be better, I know we have a few new members, but for people who have been on the committee before, want to add.
I have a suggestion, just in terms of the part of the process that I've seen, but I would like to propose that we have perhaps a more robust methodology to how we do prioritization. And so that in a sense that we give guidance to the other committees about maybe some criteria to use in terms of how to prioritize such that we're not sort of just trying to manage a list of 50 projects and prioritize them across all these different dimensions, but each committee can help us if we give them the guidance to say, here are some factors to think about when you think about how to prioritize the projects. And for example, I mean, the Kresge Foundation has a really great methodology booklet on community investment, about different factors to look at, and obviously we can tailor that to what's more appropriate for the kind of work that we do. But I feel like it would be helpful to give some kind of lens by which we direct people to give us the information, not just update the project info, which is okay, anybody can kind of do that, but what does it mean? What's in terms of how do we position and prioritize it?
Which foundation?
Kresge Foundation. I just happened to look
No,
at a
if you
few
could
different examples.
If you could share that actually with us, because that's a good point, because that's something, and it's been something since I've joined the committee, and then I was vice chair, and then I became chair, and it had been a question of whether the chair of the committee prioritizes or budget prioritizes, and Rick, who was the chair before me, had been like, oh no, we prioritize it, but there have been other chairs, I mean, people have different views that people have shared with me from the board, and so we can have some kind of criteria and have that discussion. I think that would be great.
But if we can get buy-in into the criteria, then every committee is then kind of looking at that lens, but they're doing the prioritization, but they're all using kind of the same criteria, so then it comes to us and it kind of makes sense, because of people.
So some of the reasons why I previously pushed for the agencies that respond to the budget request to present was to help bridge a gap of our requests versus where they see they expect of the community board, what's executable from the community board. Vast examples could be, we want this massive CapEx project, but then that agency says, well, in the immediate executable, we can do this project, but we don't have that conversation at all today.
Yeah, and we made that request, and we have not gotten responses back from people in trying to arrange that, unfortunately.
Does it make sense if at our committee level or the respective committees to try to make that effort to reach out to those agencies?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, especially someone at the agency who's making these decisions, I don't know how much leverage we have on, because this is like an added thing to their job. The other person that I had emailed, and this was sometime last spring and then again in the summer interacted with, was a person at the Office of Management and Budget who kind of filters all of our stuff. Like we send it to them and then they send it back. And happy to reach out again after we get our responses at the end of January and see if they can come speak to us and make it better. I mean, I think the only other thing is we can request from our city council person, maybe if they have, I don't know how much pull they would have with the office management budget. And then the other thing is there is a representative from the mayor's office who has been coming to CB6 full board. And we could talk to them because, OMB and all the agencies are under the mayor's office.
Because a budget discussion should be a partnership between the agency and the community. If responsiveness is not there, that should be one of the criteria points of the priority.
Yeah.
If they're not paying attention or responding or returning calls, that's an answer.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And I, again, not knowing what happens on the other side, right? Who, the agencies is looking at it, but there are 52 community boards, right? And so it's for them, they're probably just a lot of overwhelmed and we're like, okay, now this person wants us.
Sure.
I mean, similarly, Jim had made a request to talk to the city actuary because he was interested in the investment rate reuse of pension. And the actuary was like, I do the numbers, like I don't go speak, and stuff. And so then I went to the deputy, comptroller, and I was like, oh, I happened to actually just run into him at an event, and I was like, oh, who do we speak to about this? So we can do more research and perhaps we find someone who has the bandwidth to come speak to us.
Awkward interactions are fine.
Yeah.
That's better than no response.
Yeah.
If we're moving on to new business.
Well, Jesus has a comment, and then we can
sorry.
move on to new business.
One thing the office does, obviously, the office is very involved in this process.
Yeah.
We see how much work Ratio does on it. It's a bit of constructive criticism, I will say. It does seem in recent years that what happens is it oftentimes gets left to the chair of the budget committee and to the office.
Yeah.
What I would suggest as for the committees, I beat this drum all the time, but less is more. We used to have over 80 requests. Years ago, I started working with the chair, a couple chairs ago at the time, to pare that down. We got to around 50, we're back at 60, so they keep coming on. It's not that I'm negating that we have all these needs, it's just that when you've got too many things on your list as priorities, effectively nothing is a priority. I would also say the committees really, really need to be on board as in large numbers about what these things are and that they want them on the list. Frequently, we will see, because we sit in all these meetings and the office sees a lot more than members think we may do. One person maybe knows what the request is about, no one else does. No one is informed of what the status is. If it really is a priority, then we need to constantly be up to date. Some of the ones that the office takes an interest in, I can tell you precisely what is going on, but it's like one or two because we can't do 60 of them. I would also say if there are some requests on our list that the committee put on years ago, hasn't mentioned since, nothing. That is not good. That's not indicative of a priority. So those sorts of things I think will help make the list, one, a little trimmer, and two, I think will be more manageable so that members can go and advocate. And in the case of when the office is in front of electeds, as we sometimes are, we don't have 60 things to remember. We have a smaller number, and we can sort of strategically say, look, the board wants this, the board wants that. That's how this Boris bill came to be. I happened to see the assembly member at an event. I cornered him. I said, look, we passed this resolution. We'd love for your partnership on this. He was very keenly interested, and a bill came out of it. Sometimes that's what it is. I mean, these resolutions that you guys pass, these lists, these budget request lists that you pass, they're not Christmas lists that we send to the North Pole and then they're under the tree. No, we have to call and advocate and advocate and advocate. There are some things that are in the works that we have been on so many calls about. I've been on so many calls about. These things we just don't snap our fingers. And so while it may be nice to just put a bunch of things on the list and sort of, I know there's one philosophy, it's like put everything on the list and something will happen. It's hard to manage, and it leaves it makes it hard for the budget chair. It makes it hard for the office. But again, only you guys can make that choice because we're not on the committee.
Thank you. So I want to just had her hand up from the earlier. So I want to just have her speak and then I'll go to the people in the room.
Yeah, so I do have a question because I observed this year a number of the committee chairs didn't respond, okay?
Yeah.
And so when we went through the list, we had to look at old information. Had we ever tried scheduling each of the committee chairs for a 15 to 20 minute presentation to the budget committee and going over it so we understand what it means? We don't have that dialogue with people in person, okay? And I think that might help us to narrow down the list.
That's a great suggestion. We haven't had that. One of the things I think Jim mentioned this year to me, that there used to be a time where the committee chairs were the ones who were on the budget committee. Mm-hmm. And committee chairs didn't serve on another committee, which was interesting. And I think perhaps in the past it was done that way. I didn't know that. But yeah, maybe scheduling a meeting. Now, what I did do this year, though, I did go through and I cut out stuff. If people didn't respond to me, I sent an email saying, okay, I've seen this on here. I don't have information on it. I cut it. But then things got put back, and especially when we were then presenting it to full board, there were people who were like, oh, well, a good example of something that did get taken off was the life sciences. We had this request that I asked everybody, I'm like, where is this coming from? Where's this coming from? Nobody knew anything about it. I'm like, I'm cutting it. And then people are like, oh, why did that get taken off? I'm like, look, nobody knows what this project is.
Yeah, but the chair of a committee should take responsibility for their items. And
Yeah,
should
they
have
should.
to explain it.
And I would say that there's some committee chairs who themselves are newer and there's stuff there that they don't know, but yet still didn't want to perhaps remove the item. Oh, Brendan?
Yeah, kind of in the same vein as Lee's suggestion, just making sure that committees are actually familiar and actually discuss these things. it might be helpful for committees to have a discussion of their committee's budget requests be a standing item on their agenda sometime in the
Right.
spring around April, May. And the reason I say April, May is that way it gives enough time on the budget committees and, for over the summer, to get any updates to those budget requests. But, regardless of timeline, like that would give the opportunity for each committee to actually discuss these requests, which I notice didn't happen with most committees this time around.
Yeah, but it was requested in the spring because I started sending emails to people in February, March to put it on the agenda, and I brought it up at exec committee. And then there were people who I talked to, and then there were people like, oh, I need you to, and I did have individual discussions, some people, because they really wanted me to explain what the budget process was. And then it got pushed to again in September.
Yeah, but making it a standing item by default.
By default, yeah, as opposed to being like they need to put it on. So maybe it should just be an agenda item. Okay, that's a good point.
No, go ahead, use first.
I guess two things. Like one is I feel like there's some magic to like what you were talking about and just like putting like these rules of how to think about the budget process. Because
Yeah.
I think what we could do is like we get the response from OMB in like February or something, and then
Yeah.
like February or March board, we present these things of like, here's how we should think about a budget to like the entire full board. Because then everybody's like, it's not just like the chairs, it's everybody. Because I think there is some knowledge people who aren't chairs of like maybe
Yeah.
the life sciences thing.
Yeah.
So you get it there. And then the other thing about that's probably more drastic is just like saying we're gonna clean the list and you have to give us new requests every year. Because I think that forces it to actually come up on their meetings, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't give us a list, you get nothing, which is like kind of mean, but I think is also just a better way of saying you have to give us like fresh lists.
Yeah.
Because that prevents them from just saying like, leave the stuff on the list.
Yeah. That's a.
I was just going to say back to Jesus's point about
Yeah.
like this, look, when you have a robust set of criteria that everybody understands,
Yeah.
why the thing, then it suddenly becomes, oh, maybe that's not such a,
Yeah.
so that you kind of, it will help to winnow down
Yeah.
to the real priorities.
Steve.
So to help defend ourselves as a committee, do we have metrics like how old is a particular budget request? How stale or last touched was a budget request?
So when.
Like certain metrics like that will help if we were to say, take an option of cleaning the lists. And the chair of that committee comes back, why was that cleared? It's been there for over 5 years. The last person who touched it is no longer in the committee, has been X amount of years. And you put it as priority and you had no response. Therefore, how do you defend that it has a high response? That kind of a defense should be, we should have that kind of evidence for us, not only for us as a committee, but for them to push it back to their members.
We have some of that information. Before the Airtable, the budget request Airtable came about a couple of years ago when, I was talking with the office and we were like, look, this needs to be more organized because the office itself can't keep track of all this. And in the Airtable, there are lines for when was this added, when is this removed, and stuff like that. However, we built the Airtable with things that predate the Airtable, and there are a lot of things on there that we don't know. They were added way before even I got here. So the information is incomplete, but what we're trying our best is to keep that up to date so that when new things get added, we put it on. We don't say, in many cases, it's one person who wants one of these things on the list, and it's not a horrible thing, so nobody wants to, battle it and fight back. So it's like, that's how the list gets long. But we don't say this particular member wants this thing in the notes or anything like that. We don't want to call anybody out. And effectively, once the committee agrees and the board adopts it, it becomes the board who wants this. So.
Yeah. And usually, so this year, what I did is, Jesus, I had him, the Airtable, only the office can edit, but I had him put it into Google Sheets, and he did this last year too. And I went through and I said, how old is this from the record information there? And then I made a notation of it, like, I think this should be taken out. Then I sent it to the committee chair. And some people, if they didn't get back to me, I just deleted it. But some people did get back to me and were like, no, I want to keep this here. And I deferred to the committee chair in that situation. Now, from the other committee that I sit on, like on parks, also usually what happens is there were items on there that I thought, okay, this has been here too long, we should take it out. But most people tend to just vote in favor of things if one person feels that it should be there, is what I've observed from the committee that I'm on.
I mean, age shouldn't be the only thing. It should be a couple of other metrics like the structure you were discussing.
Yeah.
I think we should add attributes, of not only age, but last touched, last actions.
No, and I agree with you, and like some of the other stuff, and again, viewpoints differ, as Jesus pointed out.
Right.
I had suggested, and I think I suggested at this committee too, I feel like small discrete projects
Right.
can get funded quicker. And I feel like if I'm that person at this agency looking at this item and looking at 60 requests from 52 community boards, if there's something that, oh, I know I can do this, I'm gonna get it done. But that wasn't the overall feeling from, yeah.
See, Jesus, I just want to suggest that maybe we take those earlier ones that you don't know when they came on board and just assign them a date at random that was prior to the Airtable and age them that way. That's the first thing.
No, you have a marker, pre-Airtable.
It's already there,
Yeah. And the second thing was, well, actually, three things. I'm wondering, should we consider perhaps capping the number of proposals that each committee can submit? Say 3 to 5 individual proposals, so that the committees themselves can sort this out and put in some caps. And the third thing is, we need an enforcer. And if the committee chairs aren't
Yeah,
responding,
Yeah, so
then
that
maybe
I'm not,
they-
I'm not.
and it shouldn't be you. It should not, it should, well, no, it shouldn't be you. It should be, the chair
Yeah.
should delegate it maybe to the vice chair, or maybe be the bastard
Mhm.
herself or himself.
I think the idea that you lose your proposals if you don't respond is a good.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea, like going, kind of clearing it out and being like, okay, we don't have anything for you. The problem, some of
It's
them like
always
half,
hard to
half,
get people to respond
thing
to
is, half
budget
our requests
requests.
are parks, and so most agents, and most of the other committees don't have that many requests. It's actually a lot of, it's parks, and then after that, I would say housing and youth
Yeah,
and education
in
are
terms
probably
of the
the.
total
Yeah,
proposals,
maybe transportation.
so you don't wanna cap anything.
Yeah, I mean, we could decide to cap, but it's gonna really impact only one committee, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but you absolutely have to have an enforcer. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been through so many budget processes in my lifetime. And these people just don't do it.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing for them to do. It's the hardest thing for managers to do.
Mhm.
They have no idea what their actual request
Yeah.
is gonna be.
okay, so
And
I'm
you just
gonna,
have to
okay,
enforce
Sue wants to make a point, I'll let Eva go.
I just wanted to know with what Brendan was saying regarding putting it on the agenda,
Yeah,
that's what they're going to discuss in terms of what they're proposing for
Yeah.
the budget. So let's say they do that in April.
yeah,
Then in May, can each chair attend a meeting with us and present what they've distilled? Because that's part of the enforcement, because they know that they're going to have to come here. And then they have an idea of how we operate, because then we have to distill what they're presenting anyway. But in terms of it being structured, so it's agenda,
yeah.
you discuss it, you distill it as you were talking about.
Mhm.
And then whatever they decide upon, then in May, they come here, and then after that, we do what we did last month, as we're distilling what
Yes,
they've already, what we thought they wanted.
Yeah,
If
no,
there's
no,
any way
that's
they
a
could be much
Yeah,
more
that's a good
structured.
point, and to the
Yeah.
point that, Bee was making earlier about having a meeting, so I think that. And so again, as I mentioned, I'm not a good enforcer, so I've been very lax about being like pushing people. But given all these suggestions, it's like, okay, April, it's on your agenda, May, you have to come speak with us.
Yes.
And we're starting from like, okay, give us a list as opposed to here, update this. I think those things will all
Your
help.
committee chairmanship isn't necessarily secure. It's-
I mean, I like that structure, May,
Yeah.
April,
Yes.
and then now you lose
It is
it.
amazing, though, they used to always attend. Sometimes they were all a member of this.
So you also
particular
remember
committee.
this, so then Jim also
And then-
remembered this.
I think as of the last 2 years, there were still maybe 2 that were chairs that came, but over the last 2 years, there haven't been any.
Yeah, I missed all of that.
Right, and I don't,
Yeah,
I
that was
don't
even, yeah, that's
understand.
even before my time, I didn't.
Right,
realize that,
I
yeah.
don't understand why that is, but that's not a lot to ask, because
No.
just asking them, you say they don't do, just a
Yeah,
agenda and then we're just asking for one meeting
Yeah.
where you sit here with us,
Mhm.
so.
yeah,
Agreed.
yeah.
So where are we on the
Yeah, so
agenda?
I think that that's a good process. I'm gonna write some of this up, have notes. It'll be like a framework that we're gonna follow. Steve, if you can share the Kresge report with us, I think that will be helpful.
Yes,
And then I will bring this up. We have exec next Wednesday and I'll bring it up at exec. And we're all the, that's where all the committee, for those who are new, that's all the committee chairs are at the exec meeting. Yeah,
anything else on the agenda?
no, old and new business. I think you said you had
Yeah,
something.
new business, the controller released his, comprehensive financial report for the last fiscal year going through in June. I remain dismayed by the fact that he still continues to use a 7% compounded annual growth rate on his investments when the state is more than 100 basis points lower. More upsetting though is that you mentioned the actuary considered in doing her actuarial computations for OPEBs, other than post-employment benefits, she only used a 4% compounded annual growth rate. So I think it's important and somebody should ask the controller where he's getting this 7% from, because over the last 2 years, he's averaged a negative 0.35%, I think it is, return. And I just think it needs to be addressed if we're gonna live up to the obligations that we made to the city employees, that they're gonna get their pensions. Because the way things are, if you run the numbers out further, we're substantially underfunded.
Yeah.
In our pensions. And given the rest of the city's fiscal issues right now, it's beginning to look like 1975.
So, I mean, we can ask them that question, the discrepancy, and also, I mean, have you looked at the CBC? Because the Citizens Budget Commission usually, or the Independent Budget Office will always look at this number too. And
I asked them about it a number of years ago and they,
Yeah, because the last time I checked, I think we're at 90%. I mean, we're much better
right,
than
but
all the other
that's,
cities around the country.
right, but that's using the 7% compounded annual growth rate.
Yeah,
If you adopt something a little more reasonable,
yeah.
then we are several
Is this,
Okay.
100 million below.
is this something that the IBO can do a research into the current and the past rates? Cause that's what they're tasked by the independent budget office, right, to do this level of
rate?
research? Like how they came about the current rate.
They don't do it on the I don't think the IBO has done a pension. I have to take a look at that, how they've done it, but there are people who have been critical of this rate. The 7% rate has been there for a very long time, and I have
Mike
seen reports,
Bloomberg
but I
was
think it's.
critical of it.
I mean, not the,
Yeah,
not
Mike
the,
Bloomberg was critical.
but I
of it.
mean,
but independent
aside,
agencies like the CBC and others,
yeah, right, they do specific research on
Yeah.
a subject, anything
Yeah.
budget related.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
if the subject is some discrepancy between what the actuary tables are producing and what the comptroller is presenting, then that's warrants a level of independent research,
Yeah,
does it not?
no, I agree, but
Yeah, we could submit that.
yeah. I mean, I haven't Googled it in a long time. I can Google it and see. I would imagine someone has written something recently.
I wrote.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece for
Yeah.
City and State, and I
Yeah.
wrote another one for Cranes.
Oh, recent, so you can
No,
send us
no.
what you wrote.
Cranes, yeah.
Cranes
I
and her
wrote one
subscription,
for
the
the
city and
state.
state.
I wrote one for the state, and
Yeah.
the state promptly lowered the rate down to below 6%. I think it's 5.9 or 5.8 now.
Yeah.
So for an example, if we do produce the evidence and say, for example, the independent budget office produces the research, what would be the next step if there is a discrepancy? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this situation, there's a question to be asked of why the difference between the 7% and the 4%. And we could discuss it as a group and we could say, hey, this rate is too high, it should be lower. But there's frankly not much we can do. I mean, as he pointed out, the last time that anybody in the city made an issue of this was when Mike Bloomberg did, and even he had
Yeah,
hadn't been successful.
Bloomberg's quote was to the effect of, if somebody promises you, and back then it was 8%, because they did lower it 100 basis
Yeah.
points. But he said, if somebody promises you 8%, over the lifetime of an investment, take it and just make sure the guy's name isn't Bernie Madoff. Yeah, so.
That brings me, there's trainings that the Civic Engagement Commission did on the city budget. I don't know if people got a chance to listen in on that, but if you didn't, I got a recording of it too, so I can share that with anybody as well.
Yeah, next year.
Yeah.
Literally where I learned about the IBO.
Yeah, okay, and that's what reminded me. I meant to actually,
I was
I meant to.
on.
I
Yeah,
saw
well, you
you on
guys,
the
yeah.
channel.
Yeah.
You have a different profile photo on that Zoom.
Huh?
You have a different profile photo on that Zoom.
I did?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't
I
talk
guess
about.
that was my business.
It doesn't unfortunately get into the level of budget stuff that we deal with, and if like this agency stuff, if that was there. And I did mention that to the representative from the borough president's office about how that might be a good training for us to have, and maybe the borough president is more, or the Civic Engagement Commission can get all these different agency people who are making these decisions, and then it's accessible to all the community boards, not just one of them.
Oh, that wasn't available to everybody.
No, that was.
Oh.
But that training doesn't talk about what we're doing, the budget needs and stuff, right? And that perhaps they should be doing a training on that. All right, so that's all I had. Anyone else have anything else?
Whole business.
No, mine was just that if anyone wants a recording of the training, I can email it.
Yeah, can you email it to me?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I think there was like some weird discrepancy in one of the charts, but
Okay.
yeah.
So.
I'm glad you found it useful. Yep, someone want a motion to adjourn? Did you motion to adjourn? You did, okay, I wasn't,
I thought I
yeah,
just
I think that's AK